You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles, welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network. We are live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. This is your UCLA Bruins edition. Excited to have the Madman back. I wouldn't say back with me. He's always with me, but a little hiatus last week. But we are back talking UCLA football for our regular scheduled program. Bruins on the court, on the hardwood, have a big game tonight, Thursday, the time of this recording. If you're listening on radio, it happened last night, so you already know the results. But our Bruins are ranked 4th in the country, so hopefully, obviously, this is a football show, but hey, we can still root for the mighty Bruins in all aspects of sports. So, but Jamal, missed you. How you doing, brother? Happy Thursday/Friday, whenever you're listening. How you doing?
Doing well, Rye. Excited to be chatting Bruins with you. You know, this is the year potentially of UCLA winning it all in basketball. And can they follow it up with a glorious 2023 in football? I'm not ready to say they can win it all in football, but hey, you know, we can dream.
Yes. Hey, I mean, crazier things have happened. You never know. I think we're high on this team going into next year. We've talked about it a lot, and they could definitely surprise some folks in the last year in the Pac-12, and they will certainly try to do so. But today's show, as always, brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. It's going to get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, Jamal, we were talking obviously beforehand, prepping for the show, and thought it would be fun right now. You know, spring games coming up here fairly soon, and we can finally kind of talk about actually some practices and scrimmages and stuff on the field. But, you know, the transfer portal's closed. National Recruiting Days came and gone. So that's all behind us now. And so there's not a whole lot of news, I guess, to get into at the moment. Obviously, there is some news, which we'll get into maybe later, but there's the potential of Bill McGovern, defensive coordinator, stepping away, which is obviously a big deal due to health. And obviously, we hope that what's best for him and his family, but we can talk about that later when there's more details around it. Don't want to speculate. So thought today would be fun to talk about, you know, we've talked about DTR a lot, but, you know, he is in the draft process, trying to make an NFL squad. We talked 2 weeks ago or so after the Shrine Bowl which he was a major proponent and was kind of the talk of the town, at least in the practices. You know, the Patriots were there. We talked about Fitz there. But we just saw a quarterback play in the Super Bowl that I've compared him to. You somewhat agreed with me. Jalen Hurts is a guy that I thought DTR can get to or aspire to play at that level and potentially has the potential. So that'd be fun to talk about either how he does get to that or if he can get to that. So let's just kind of dive into it. Like your thoughts on the comparison of DTR and Jalen. Do you see it closer or do you see it widening after seeing what Jalen was able to do in that Super Bowl?
Ryan, I think that obviously it's hard to make that comparison of Jalen Hurts, near Super Bowl MVP, versus DTR, college quarterback at UCLA. So this is the last 3 years of Jalen Hurts, 3-4 years of him being able to be more refined through great coaching, through the systems that he's been able to be in, as well as through the ranks of professional football. But I think the more appropriate comparison is Jalen Hurts when he was at Alabama versus the DTR of UCLA. Let's not forget, Jalen Hurts got the 1 year with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, really got NFL concepts and NFL tutelage, and then had the great work with that Philly coaching staff to really kind of take him to the next level. But when you look at just the raw toolbox, big arm, you know, unbelievably tough in terms of running the football, same strengths in terms of RPO, zone mesh concept, be able to air it out, check downs, same weaknesses, being able to read defenses, progress through your different options, be able to process information. When you look at where Jalen Hurts was 4 years ago and where DTR is today, that is a very similar quarterback. Now, Jalen Hurts was a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, about 15 pounds thicker. So I think DTR needs to get into the weight room a little bit, put on 7 to 10 pounds of muscle. But if he's able to do that and still maintain his elusiveness, still maintain his speed running the football and not really lose anything in terms of mechanics or velocity with the arm, you really have a pro prospect here that, given the right system and a willingness by that coach to build a system around personnel versus being able to force feed strategy to your personnel, you really have the opportunity to find a diamond in the rough. And, Ryan, when we look at the state of NFL quarterbacks, especially those in the playoffs, let's not forget whether it was Kirk Cousins, whether it was Jalen Hurts, whether it was Dak Prescott. These guys were all drafted in later rounds with very established starting quarterbacks as almost backup plans, as almost insurance policies to those quarterbacks. I mean, you had Carson Wentz, you had Romo, you had RG3 at the time when Kirk Cousins was drafted by Washington. So these guys are basically just sort of insurance policies. So, and here they are, all three of those guys were in the playoffs this year. And when we talk about the state of elite quarterback play in the NFL being a little bit bare in the cupboard, why can't DTR be drafted in round 5, round 6, round 7 by an Indianapolis who also, by the way, may draft Bryce Young? Or why can't they be drafted by a Houston Texans who may also be drafting a CJ Stroud with their top pick? So I think that there's definitely a path of precedence, not just with DTR, the player, in terms of his skill set, but also the mentality of NFL teams that are thinking about this in a forward-thinking fashion, that unless you have one of these 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are just all-world, all-franchise, all-decade, you can never have too many quarterbacks to bring into that room and compete, because you actually just never know who's going to emerge. The cream always rises to the top, Ryan, they say, but sometimes you don't know what that cream is when you're putting the ingredients together. And so I think for all of those reasons, DTR has the potential to be a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, I mean, we know his competitiveness, and he's going to, wherever he ends up, he's going to want to be a starter one day. He's going to fight to this. So we don't have to question that, and he'll get bored or stagnant. We know that won't be the case, but obviously the situation is going to be very important. And I love that you brought up some of the past situations, because Kirk Cousins drafted the same year as RG3. RG3 went number 2 overall, and then Kirk Cousins was in the 4th round, and everyone was, and there's all these stories come out that Mike Shanahan actually he didn't really want RG3, but management forced him to get him. So they ended up taking the guy he wanted in the 4th round in Kirk Cousins. And we all know how that kind of story played out to an extent. And so, yeah, it wouldn't be shocking to see this year a young team that is looking for a quarterback to take one in the 1st and maybe take a DTR, where they can basically learn together. Because when you draft a young quarterback of any ilk, whether it's 1st round or 7th round, but especially if you're drafting it to be your future, you're going to allow some of the growing pains. You're going to focus more on the mentorship, the grooming. Whereas if you're a team like I don't want to say the Rams, because Stafford's kind of on the back nine too. But if you're a team like the Chargers, for instance, and they were to draft a quarterback in the 5th round as a backup, like, they're not going to be giving a lot of credence to that backup, because they have their quarterback Justin Herbert for the next 12 years or so. So he was strictly drafted as a backup in time of need. Whereas when you draft a young guy, it's like, well, who knows if the 6th round beats out the 1st round? Who knows if the 1st round guy struggles mightily and we need to give him some rest or whatever, or gets hurt. And so I think that is a situation you want for DTR, as opposed to going to a team that has that very strong veteran presence, because he's just not going to get the teaching he needs. Because, and I'll say this, as you mentioned, Jalen Hurts going to Lincoln Riley, and they talked a lot, we knew this, but they talked a lot about it leading up to the Super Bowl, about how when Jalen Hurts decided to transfer, Nick Saban basically said, you need to go with Lincoln Riley, because he's going to give you the best shot to get to the NFL. And Lincoln Riley obviously has proven that with his, Heisman level quarterbacks, but also to an extent, the success that the quarterbacks have had at the NFL level. And my one fear with DTR, not in terms of his maturity, but in terms of his quarterback growth, is, as much as we love Chip Kelly as a college coach and what he's done with the UCLA program, his track record of quarterbacks in college have never proven to go on and do well in the NFL, because it's a very different style of offense. I mean, even you could look at even Nick Foles on the Eagles when he was there, had a very good 1 year in that offense, and then really went down because it's a style of offense that wasn't really sustainable, if you will. You look at Marcus Mariota, obviously run the Heisman, picked 2 overall, and could never elevate that game to the next level. So the hope would be that DTR finds himself in a situation that really has someone that can develop him as a true NFL style quarterback, stay true to himself, which is what Jalen Hurts has done, but also develop better as a passer, which he'll have to do. And I think he definitely can do, Jamal. The hope is just where he ends up and what situation to allow him to do that.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you said it best. And it's also so interesting that Chip hasn't really had a quarterback in the NFL for the better part of 10 years. Obviously, Mariota has been a starter, backup, spot starts with Atlanta and all of that stuff. But the fact that Chip has only had DTR his entire UCLA tenure and then took a year off and then was in the pros and so on and so forth. So this is the first iteration of whether the Chip system can sort of work post-Oregon, as crazy as that is to believe. And Chip has been with UCLA for half a decade. So this is going to be a really interesting data point. And I think what's interesting is that his reputation is preceding him, where you saw the Patriots staff, you saw Belichick giving him a little bit extra attention during the Senior Bowl and looking at him in the right way and in that sort of all-star circuit. And so is that a potential destination with the right coaching to come in after Mac Jones and provide some competition there? Obviously, the Patriots already have some uncertainty at the quarterback position, given the game of musical chairs they were playing in that role last year. Some other teams, Ryan, that are very interesting to me. What about the Cardinals? You know, you look at a Kyler Murray, look at now him getting hurt. You look at Kingsbury out the door. You're bringing a defensive guy. Maybe you want to just sort of simplify the offense a little bit. And now you bring in a DTR who has a very similar skill set to Kyler Murray. In the event Kyler Murray can't go, you can still do so many of the same things with DTR. That could be a very interesting scenario. And then there's the obvious one that so many people have talked about over the last several weeks and months, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. What happens with Lamar Jackson? Do you franchise tag him? Is he your quarterback of the future? What's his injury history situation? But the fact of the matter is you've built a team around Lamar Jackson's style, just in the way the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts. So you can't just bring in some pure pocket passer, big-armed guy and expect to have the same results, because the way you've set up your offensive line, the way you've set up your tight ends, your backs, everything around your entire system was predicated on a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. And you have Huntley there. Is he really your quarterback of the future? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you bring in a DTR and you explore that situation further. And then you have sort of the teams that are just looking for potentially a quarterback or a bridge solution. What about the Jets? The Jets are right now in a position here, Ryan, where I don't think that they have their quarterback of the future. We don't know what's going on with Zach Wilson, but they won too many games this year in a sense to really be in that Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis sweepstakes to a certain extent. So do they take a shot at a DTR as maybe a bridge quarterback, and then DTR impresses and then finds his way home? So there's a lot of very interesting opportunities here. And I think for the right situation, the right coach, DTR could really find himself in a very unique predicament. And I think that he's one of those prospects, Ryan, where I'd rather see him go undrafted than go in like the 6th round or 7th round to the wrong situation. And so that's also one of those where when he can kind of go hand pick where he wants to go and where the system fits his style, that could be very beneficial for him moving forward.
Yeah, and it's his draft stock is so fascinating because, you know, it could be as low as undrafted, and I wouldn't be shocked if he goes as high as the 4th round, just because we've seen the NFL where his biggest deficiency is his decision making, but his athleticism is off the charts. And we see all the time teams and franchises say, you know what, we'll take a swing on athleticism and see if we can coach the decision making. And we've seen it pay off. We've seen it not pay off. And so it's like, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes in the 4th round, and then I wouldn't be shocked if he goes undrafted. You know, the combine will be really fun to watch because obviously I don't think I think there's some stock that happens actually in the drills, but I think it's more so off the field when they do all the interviews. And I think he'll blow teams away with his interviews. I think there was a lot of good talk about him at the Shrine Bowl because of that reason. Now, in the practices, he also didn't look great in some of the aspects we've talked about, but I think he still glowingly had a good Shrine Bowl because of the off the field stuff and the conversation and interviews. And I think he'll do that at the combine as well. So I don't know, Jamal. I could see him going fourth. I could see him undrafted. It's going to be crazy to see where he actually ends up. But I agree, in the right situation, I think he could really surprise people.
And how little has things really changed, Ryan? I mean, you and I had such a similar conversation at the start of the college football year, really leading into that Washington game. If you and I are being honest here, remember UCLA was 4-0, super soft schedule. You and I were in Boulder together with our wives. We saw the first non-conference game. Charbonnet sort of exploded. But we hadn't seen much out of DTR up until that point. And I remember you and I had a show where we said, they're 4-0. They're primed for a scenario here where they could beat Washington, beat Utah, get to 6-0, which is exactly what happened. And who knows what could happen from there. But there was a scenario where DTR could have been a dark horse Heisman, or DTR could have been benched for Ethan Garbers. Like, the dichotomy was that vast at the end of September, beginning of October. And that dichotomy remains now with him as a pro prospect. You're talking about him, fourth round is smack in the middle of the draft. So you're saying he's going to go smack in the middle of the draft, or he might not be drafted at all. And so it's just so quintessential DTR, where he's just polarizing on every front. It's what makes him unique. It's what makes him special. It's what makes him memorable and go down as one of the all-time greats in UCLA history and the greatest competitor in UCLA football history. But it also makes for a very intriguing draft weekend of what you do with him. And I think that's a really interesting point, Ryan, that you brought up, because the scouts salivate over the arm strength and over the 40 time and over the leaping ability, because those are all the things that you can't teach. And they believe, hey, if you put him in the right system that's very intentional, that plays to his strengths, and you have the right positional coaches around him to work on mechanics, to work on his feet, to work on how he processes information, now all of a sudden you've got one of these incredible steals of the draft when you look at kind of the annals of the NFL. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see. I'm rooting so hard for him. I just want him to be in the right situation, and the sky is the limit if he finds that right opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. We could be sitting here 3 years from now looking back on this conversation and say, man, look at how far this kid's come and look at how he's taking the league by storm. I mean, Dak Prescott, no one expected Dak to be anything, and here he is, the face of the Cowboys. And, whether you think he's a great, good, or so-so quarterback, that's a different conversation, but he is a starter in the league that is doing good things, just won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. And so DTR certainly has a path where he could emulate success because he has the mindset to do it. So it'll just be fascinating. We'll have all the coverage. We'll potentially be at the combine even, so we'll see what he does. So, of course, we're already up against the clock, Jamal, but quickly I want to touch on Zach Charbonnet. I would think no later than the second round, we hear his name called. We both believe he's a first-round talent, but because of how running backs are drafted, it would be fairly difficult for him to go that early. What are just some teams you would love to see call his name come the draft? And as far as fits, and I'm putting you kind of on the spot here, we didn't prep that, but just, 2 to 3 teams you're like, hey, I would love to see Charbonnet on this squad if he gets called in the second round.
Yeah, Ryan, it's a great question. And he is, it's Bijan Robinson and Zach Charbonnet as the top 2 running backs here in this draft. And I completely agree with you. He's a first-round talent, but given the evolution of that position, the first team that just jumps off the board to me are the Chargers. Can you imagine Charbonnet with Eckler, with an offensive coordinator like Kellen Moore, who just came from the Cowboys, where he had Zeke Elliott and where he had Pollard. And so you want to give a guy like Kellen Moore the total toolbox, the entire skill set, and all the dimensionality that he's comfortable with to really exercise the depth of his playbook. And so the Chargers absolutely jump to mind here. The other team that I could see become very interesting with Charbonnet moving forward, and you may not like to hear this, our fans may not like to hear this, but what about the Niners? When you put him in there with Shanahan, He's got Debo. They're probably going to lose Brandon Ayuk. I know that's a receiver. You got McCaffrey. He always gets so clever with the backfield. Now you look at their quarterback situation with Purdy and Trey Lance, and Purdy with this UCL, and Lance, you don't know. I mean, they might run the wing T next year over the course of the season, and why not have Charbonnet be one of those three? So those are some interesting ones to me. And then obviously the teams that kind of need really good running back play. I think the Bills could be a very interesting choice, even though they've improved here. I think the Bengals could be very interesting to sort of offset some of the offensive line challenges and do a little bit more play action with Burrow. I think there's a number of teams in the NFC. I mean, right down from Washington to the Giants with Saquon. Can you imagine sort of a dual back system there? To the Saints. I mean, you name it. I think any team would really salivate having Zach Charbonnet there, potentially even the Titans with Derrick Henry being kind of on the other side of his career. And here comes the heir apparent to really be able to run that smash mouth offense.
Yeah, it's going to be, I can't wait to see the Chargers, if I'm the Chargers, and we'll talk more about it maybe on our Chargers show next week, but so many people will put like evaluations on players like, oh, it's a reach. Like all the mocks have him going in the 40s. Like you can't take him in the first round, you're reaching. And teams show every year that like, if it's your guy, you get your guy. You don't care where. I mean, the whole Vontae Mack, no matter what, right? And draft day with Kevin Costner at 7, and he takes him at 1 overall. I mean, that's a real thing, that if it's your guy, and obviously you're not going to take a guy that's a 6th round grade, you're going to take him in the 1st round. But if it's like in that 1 to 50 range, like it really doesn't matter. You don't take any chances. And if I'm the Chargers at 21 and Charbonnet's there, and I think everyone agrees as of right now, pre-free agency, the biggest need for the Chargers is either a running back or a speed receiver. I'm taking Charbonnet over what the speed receivers are probably going to be sitting there because I can probably get a speedy receiver in the later rounds that can do exactly what I need, whereas Charbonnet is going to be a bell cow back that's going to play so much more time and would just lift that offense and take the pressure off of Justin Herbert, which would help so much. So I would love it if he stays in LA. He would fit with the Rams too. Let's be honest. There's still a lot of uncertainty with Cam Akers, but we don't want to just talk only LA teams. I think Pittsburgh is a good fit. They're a pro running team. And I feel like they haven't really, obviously they drafted Najee in the 1st round a few years ago, but they've kind of lost their running identity a little bit, if you will. And so getting him in there, he's that bruiser back that can do it all. Tampa hasn't had a great running game. I know they've re-signed Leonard Fournette last year, but they've kind of lost their identity a little bit. He would fit really anywhere. So it's all more of where do we want to see him, which obviously would be a stay in LA.
Ravens, right? I mean, the Ravens for their style kind of could use that bell cow. I mean, can you imagine DTR and Charbonnet both ending up with the Ravens together? I mean, I could see it. Yeah, I would not be shocked at all. So, it will be fun to watch. We'll have all the coverage for you all off season long. That is all the time we have. This is the LA Football Show. Thank you, Bruins fans. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.